What's up, guys? Welcome to the Refined Strength Podcast. This is a Solocast episode, and I'm just going to talk about bodybuilding and how to get into it if you have never competed before. So, if you're a seasoned competitor, this might not be the episode for you, but you might be able to get some education or guidance, insight from it, whatever, for friends that you know are wanting to get into bodybuilding. Maybe you can send it to them. And maybe it will help you as you give advice to other friends and people that want to get into bodybuilding. So, bodybuilding is becoming more and more popular. I think it's really cool that it's becoming so popular. You know, we're seeing bigger numbers at amateur shows every year, it seems. I have been bodybuilding in a competitive way since 2015. I did my first show in 2015, did my fourth show, which was my first national show, and got my pro card in 2017. Then I did a couple pro seasons in 2019 and 2021, and those didn't go so well. But what they did do for me is that they gave me a lot of insight and they taught me a lot of lessons that I honestly needed to know before I became a successful pro, which that's the plan this year and in the future. But the biggest thing that I think that they've done in terms of impact me is, and this is, not just my pro seasons, but every season that I've had, is preparing me to help athletes more. Not just athletes who are my clients, because I coach competitive athletes, but also just athletes around me. Having influence as an influencer, someone with a decent amount of followers on Instagram and just social media, and having impact, like that, having impact is a big responsibility. And I think that's again one of my missions of this podcast, which is to make an impact on people and help people so that they hopefully don't make the same mistakes, or maybe they can watch themselves make some mistakes and learn better from them. So if you are listening to this and you've never bodybuilded, you've never competed before, maybe you're starting out thinking about competing, number one piece of advice I could give to anyone who comes to me and says like, hey, I want to bodybuild. I want to do my first show. I want to do bikini, figure, bodybuilding, men's physique, classic physique, is like, it's going to take time. If you don't think that it'll take a lot of time to get to a high level in this sport, you're wrong. So just let's get that out of the way right away. It's really important to be just patient and know that it's not going to happen overnight. If you want to be a wellness pro or a figure pro, even a bikini pro, you have to know that that's a lot of muscle to put on your frame. If you're starting from, maybe you've been training here and there for a year, 6 months or something like that, maybe you've been working out for 5-10 years, but that working out has consisted of a lot of cardio, a lot of classes. Maybe, you're an endurance athlete. Yeah, you've been training, but you haven't been bodybuilding. And so when you want to get into bodybuilding and you've never been on like a super consistent strength training regimen of any kind, you haven't been eating to grow, you haven't been working on your metabolism, know right now that it's going to take that before you can start a prep. So that's something that unfortunately I see a lot as a coach, where people will come to me, say in January of a year, and they'll say, I want to compete this year. And then I ask them like, well, where are your calories at? Well, I don't track my calories. I don't track my macros. Or I'll ask like, how long have you been training? Well, I've been working out since I was an athlete in college, but I've really been like bodybuilding for like 6 months or like a year. But like they know that they have a lot to do, but they don't really see how long it's going to take. So if you are getting into bodybuilding, bare minimum, plan on building for a year, if not more. Plan on making sure, or having your coach make sure, that you're healthy inside and out. If you got a lot of injuries going on, if you have some hormonal issues, if you have some digestive issues that you don't know how to manage yet, then it's going to take some work on that first before you can get to a place where you can really build a lot of muscle. With social media is great for a lot of reasons, but social media also makes it so we think that things take less time than they do. You see a pro even, or an amateur at a high level, post their transformation of their 20-week prep transformation where they went from being really soft, probably some good amount of body fat, and then they say they lost 50 pounds, they lost 40 pounds, 30 pounds, to be just the stage lean, shredded, really muscular physique. And they win a show or win the pro card or whatever. What people don't see in that transformation is what happened before the transformation. What happened before they started their prep. It wasn't just haven't been training that long, I haven't been tracking my macros. Like, it takes a lot of work in that off season, in that building season, whether it's your first show or your 10th show. You have to understand that it takes a lot of work, consistency, mental fortitude, all of the things before you get into competing, before you get into the actual prep. Bodybuilding, the majority of your time as a bodybuilder, if you're going to do it as long as I've done it, or as long as a lot of pros have been doing it, the majority of the time is spent building, not prepping, not losing fat, not getting shredded. The majority of the time is that building phase. So if you're starting out, where to start? First off, I recommend just seeing if you can get a little more consistent than you are now. So start tracking your food, see what you eat, see what you gravitate towards, see if you need to build your metabolism up. Start moving, start training. There's lots of training programs online. You could easily pick any one that's sold in an ebook form from anyone. You could join a strength training app. You could do so many low cost things just to get moving, just to start training heavier, trying to progress with progressive overload, just progressing in some way each week or every few weeks, and just start there. You don't necessarily need a coach when you first start thinking about bodybuilding. However, it's obviously going to be really helpful because a coach is going to help you get a little bit more specific in your actions. And if you have a really specific goal like bodybuilding, I want to step on stage and I want to look like this, then you have to have really specific actions to back that up. So some of those specific actions are tracking your food, getting on a not only consistent intake with your food day to day, but getting on an intake that's optimal for you personally, because you are not going to be the same in terms of like what you respond best to than your best friend in the gym who looks great. Or you might be, you're going to be different than someone who's 6 weeks out from a show or who's deep into their off season. Everyone's a little different, and calorie calculators online, while they can serve as kind of like a baseline, they don't take into account things like your activity level, like your true activity level. They don't take into account your stress level, how much you sleep, what your internal health is like your blood work, your hormones, things like that. They also don't take into account like how you're training, how intense your training is, your nutrient density. They don't take into account what you've been eating, how much you've been eating, that kind of thing. So I'm not a big fan of calculators. There's not just a one size fits all approach or calculation that tells you like, this is how to calculate what your macros are. That's why coaches have jobs, right? So getting a coach will help you figure out where you should start in terms of, do I start with maintenance? Do I start with a building phase? Do I start with a health phase or a prep? Generally, I like to start my clients on kind of a maintenance phase that we then transition after I learn the body for a few weeks, after they gain consistency. I like to then shift them into usually a building phase so that we can build and get to where they need to be muscular-wise, health and metabolism-wise before we can start a prep or before we can start a lifestyle prep. Because some people have way more weight to lose than a single prep can make happen. So that's typically what I like to make sure of, is just like finding out where they're at, getting them to a stable maintenance, and then building from there. So getting a coach is going to help you stabilize and get your nutrition to a good place. And it's also going to help you dial in your training. I don't really take on people who want to do their own training and just have me do their nutrition. I used to do this, honestly, in my first few years of coaching. And what I found was that their training sucked. Like, even people who had been training for a long time, who had been reading all the best articles and following all the best people, the training aspect wasn't matching the nutrition, and we weren't both on board with how their training should just go along with their nutrition. My coach once made a really great analogy, which is like, Doing nutrition without training as a coach is kind of like wearing two shoes with only one sock. So like shoes are on both feet, but only one foot has a sock. Like you're just missing something. And you need both pairs, socks and shoes, in order to like complete yourself, like to complete the look, to complete, the protocol of that a coach is going to give a client. So nutrition and training, they go hand in hand. There's different phases that we go into, especially if someone's going into more of a health phase where they need to work on their digestion or their hormones or something like that. And training plays a big role in that. Sometimes we need to really bring stress down with training. So we bring training intensity or volume down. Some people are different in what they respond better to, what they recover better from. So training, having your coach looking at your training and holding you accountable to the training that they want you to be using is really important. One thing that I do with my training or with my clients with training is I make sure that their form is in a place that I am on board with. Because even if someone's been training for years, even if they're a personal trainer, they're not always training the way I want them to train. Um, they're not always training with like the intention that I specifically want for them, that person. Maybe they're going through the motions a little bit because they have been training for years and they don't really think about the mind to muscle connection. They're just getting in the reps. So I like to watch videos every week of my clients so that I can see what their form is like. If they have an issue like, I can't get to depth, or they're leaning way too far forward in a squat, or their heels are coming up, I can see things like that and I can say like, hey, let's maybe add this mobility move in for your ankles so we can get a deep squat without your heels coming up. Or, your knee hurts, maybe we don't do this exercise like this. Maybe we do it like this. Maybe we add a knee sleeve, something like that. So there's so much benefit in having a coach do both your training and nutrition so that you're leaving no stone unturned. You're doing everything that you possibly could in order to get to where you need to be, especially when we're talking about bodybuilding, because bikini versus figure versus wellness, or on the men's side, or versus women's physique as well, or on the men's side, men's physique versus classic versus bodybuilding, they're all really different divisions. They're all muscular, but in a different way, and they have different priorities. Bikini versus wellness, bikini is a little more balanced than wellness. Wellness has big, dense legs at every angle. So quads, hamstrings, glutes, they're all really dense. Whereas with bikini, instead of wellness, like I just described, bikini is more balanced top to bottom. So they have light shoulders. They're not fully capped out. Their glutes are not squared off. They're not supposed to be overly hard. They're not supposed to be so dominant that it looks completely off balance. You want a good top to bottom balance and a good side to side balance. But their posing is also different. And so you have to take into consideration what type of training is going to elicit certain results. And then you have to think about what specific weak points you as an individual has. So someone who wants to do wellness but has only ever done bikini, she's gonna have to increase her leg training and change her leg training. Instead of just focusing on glutes and light legs, now you're focusing on all legs all the time. Someone who's transitioning maybe from figure to wellness, similar. They are going to train more legs, probably a lot less upper body, if not completely stopping upper body training. And the combinations can keep going from there. With men's physique doesn't require legs to be like, legs are not judged as much as the upper body. That's why they wear board shorts, and that's why up until recently there hasn't been a weight cap for men's physique. So there's a lot of differences in the divisions, and there's different priorities that you have to consider. And honestly, when you're starting out wanting to compete, even if you're not going to compete for 2 to 3 years, having a coach to take out all the guesswork is really, honestly, really important. Another option is just to learn more about the divisions, go to shows, see what people are doing, educate yourself. And, if you want to be self-coached, at least for the first little bit of your bodybuilding journey, then, you can do it that way too. So now talking about like the levels of bodybuilding. So There's when you first start out with competing, you have amateur shows. That's, your NPC. NPC is one of the biggest federations, or it's the biggest federation, and it's what most people compete in. There are other federations. A lot of them are natural federations, where that means they're not tested. So you're gonna do that show, or sorry, those federations are tested. So you do that show, you're gonna get drug tested in some way. Sometimes it's a urinalysis test, sometimes it's a polygraph before, after the show, just depends on the federation and the show and the promoter. And then NPC generally is untested. There are some tested shows. So if you see an NPC natural show, like the Natural Northwest show in Washington, or there's a natural Vegas show this year as well. There's a few natural shows throughout the year in different areas, but they're a little fewer and far between. So you do an NPC show. You can choose to do an NPC national qualifier. And a national qualifier means that if you win the show, or if you get top 2 in the show, I think it's top 2, you will be able to be qualified for nationals, or a national show. So then there's a few national shows per year in the US, and if you can only compete in those if you got a national qualifications. And there's different placings and show rules that kind of pertain to that. You can find that on NPC News Online, where they have the national qualification rules. So you get a national qualification at your regional show. You then have a ticket to nationals. However, that doesn't always mean you should do nationals. I always recommend, if someone says, I want to get a pro card, that means they want to go to a national show, because if you win or get second place at some national shows you need to win, some you need to win the overall, you get a pro card, depending on the show. And then you're an IFBB pro. So if that's your goal, you have to consider, just because I win my regional show doesn't mean that you should go to national shows. It doesn't mean that you're ready to be a pro. If you won your show, or if you won your class, your open class, doesn't mean that you're pro card material. It just means you were the best that day out of those 5 to 10 people, if that. So you want to look at how competitive you can really be, because you're not always going to be competitive. If you're competing and you do well at a regional show, that doesn't really mean anything outside of that show. So you always have to consider, like, what is the reality of the situation, and how you find that is look at who is winning and doing well and turning pro at national shows. You can do that by, again, going to NPC News Online and going to former national show galleries. So you can look at something like NPC Nationals, NPC USAs. Those are 2 of the bigger national shows in the that happen in the year. USA's happens usually in Vegas in the summer, and then NPC Nationals happens sometimes in Florida. This year it happened in Dallas, and that's towards the end of the year, usually November, December time period. So looking at the people that win national shows is a great way to look at, literally put their picture next to your stage pictures at your regional show, and see, what are the differences. If you are not nearly as lean, not nearly as big, not nearly as conditioned, poised, if you don't have the shape, then compared to the person that's winning the national show in your division, then it's probably not a good idea for you to go to a national show. Now, if you're really, really close, then you have more of a reason to go to a national show. But you also have to consider, are you financially ready to do a national show? Is your prep are you in a good place health-wise to continue your prep and go to that national show? Sometimes people have a really long, hard prep, and they get really lean, and they do their show, they win an overall, they're feeling good, but then after a week, after that show is over, they realize, I really can't go another 4 weeks to nationals. I'm done. And so you always have to consider that, and know that if your gut says that you're not ready to keep going in your prep, or you really cannot afford to spend the money to go to a national show, then don't do it. The stage is always going to be there. You can take the rest of the year off, maybe take the following year off, and really grow to be truly undeniable at that next national show, and try when you're more ready, because the judges at national shows, at pro shows, at regional shows, they don't give a fuck if you can't afford it. They don't give a fuck how far you came or how hard you worked. they don't have a hard work meter when they're looking at people on stage. They literally look at everyone on stage next to each other, and the girl that fits the criteria the best out of those people on stage, that's the girl who's going to win. That's the guy who's going to win. It doesn't necessarily matter if they don't look exactly like, you know, the national winner that year or exactly like the pro that year. It matters who fits the criteria for this division the best out of these people on stage. And then they kind of go from there and they score people against the criteria, against the person they think fits it best. And that's how they judge. So if you look at yourself next to someone who's winning a national show, you don't fit the criteria as well as them, it's probably not the best time for you. Or if you do fit the criteria, but you can't afford the $500 ticket to nationals or the travel or the extra things that you have to do for the rest of your prep, then it's not worth it to go. So always really consider all of the buckets that you need to kind of fill before starting a prep, before going to nationals, and so on. So if you win your nationals or your national show and you get your pro card, what do you do after that? Highly recommend taking a good amount of time off, because even though you get your pro card and you're now an IFBB pro, you're most likely not ready to step on stage as a pro, because of the fact that people that are at national shows, they're still not quite up to par from as far as like who's winning pro shows. So if you want to do really well at a pro show, then you have to look at yourself next to the top pros and see like, what are the differences here? What are my weak points? If you have any weak points, it's ideal that you take some time away, because pros, yes, they have weak points, but not nearly as many as you do as a brand new pro or as an amateur. And like when you turn pro, you were an amateur yesterday. You weren't a pro yesterday. You haven't been a pro for a long time. So I think that's something that's really important too, to consider, is just the fact that like when you become a pro, you have to consider, I'm now at the bottom of the barrel. Like now I'm a small fish in a big pond. And before this day, I was a big fish in a small pond. So then you go up to the next level and now you're a pro. So you have to consider, how close am I to winning that pro show? Or how close am I to that first call out at the pro show? And at the pro level, there's less shows, there's higher stakes, we're competing for money. So there's going to be people doing a lot more to get to that place. So keep in mind too, that your coach is going to, like, a good coach should have your longevity in mind. A good coach should be thinking not only about your prep and how well you can do at the show, but should also be thinking about how your reverse diet post-show is going to be. They should also be thinking about what you're going to do, how long your off season is going to be. And if you get a coach who tells you before you hire them or when you're working with them that like, hey, you're not ready for this show, we need to push it off, or hey, you're not ready for nationals, you're not going to go pro at this national show, or it's very unlikely that you would, then 9 times out of 10, you should listen to that person. Because I'm a coach. If I had someone who was ready to go pro, I would say, hell yeah, let's get them on stage. Let's get you there. But if I don't think someone is ready, then I really don't want them to be up there. I don't want them to waste their money on it, their time, their mental state. And I also don't want to put a package up there that I'm not proud of as a coach, that because that's my livelihood. Yes, I care about the person and their goals, but if your goals don't have realistic expectations, then it's my job to help you see the reality of the situation. So if a coach tells you you need more time, you probably need more time. They're not trying to force any kind of weird agenda on you. They're really trying to help you. So if someone tells you you need more time, they're probably right. If someone tells you, oh yeah, you can do anything you set your mind to, and they don't really look at the reality and like the whole picture, they're probably trying to sell you something, and they don't have your best interest at heart. So that is basically how to bodybuild. That's how to get started. Is you can do stuff on your own. You can learn a lot on your own through social media, through education, through following good coaches who sound like they make sense, or you can do your research and hire a coach. And the best way to hire a coach is ask around, ask friends who they coach with, look at forums. Reddit is a great place where people talk about coaches. Instagram is as well, Facebook, everything. and do your research. Like, look at the coach. Don't just hire the first person that looks really good, because just because someone looks good or they have a pro card doesn't mean that they're a good coach. It just means that they know how to follow directions. So while doesn't mean that you can't have an IFBB pro as a coach, it means that not all coaches are the same. So do your research and set up interviews with possible coaches that that come recommended, that have great client transformations on their page, that seem like they are really health focused and people first, not money first. And do your research to get interviews, ask them questions, ask what their values are as coaches, because just because someone has a certain amount of pros on their roster, or this many accolades, doesn't necessarily mean they can take you there. It just means that they took other people there. So while yes, the track record is great, referrals and testimonials and how the clients feel with that person and what their health is like, what their client retention is like, that's what I in my opinion, that's what really matters. That's how I chose my coach. That's how a lot of clients choose me. So yeah, talk to other coaches, pick one, and really commit to them and ask them questions. Be inquisitive, be a sponge and soak up as much as you can, so you understand the why behind anything that they give you, whatever protocol, diet, training, whatever they give you. So if you have the why, and if you really know the reason behind what they're doing, you're just going to have more buy-in, and you're going to want to do it, and you're going to have more fun with it too. And having fun with it is the most important part, honestly. Like, yeah, it's a hard sport, it's extreme in a lot of ways, but having fun with it is the number one goal, honestly. Because at the end of the day, it's a hobby. It's a fun hobby, it's an extreme hobby, but it is a hobby. Just like snowboarding or golfing or collecting things or whatever, it's a hobby that we choose to do and puts our bodies and minds through a lot, but it requires a lot from you and your life and your mindset and your body, and you want to make sure that you're in the right hands and that you're doing it for the right reasons. So find a coach and just go for it, and hopefully you'll do great. But if you want to see more of the Refined Strength podcast, please like and subscribe. To like the video, subscribe to the channel. This is a new podcast. I'm really trying to get it out there. So send this to your friends. Send this to anyone that has never competed before or is thinking about competing and needs some just basic information. I'm going to be going through a lot more topics and getting more into the nitty-gritty parts of bodybuilding, but also mindset and lifestyle, business and relationships. And that's what I'm most excited for with this podcast, is just bringing all of those things together as someone who's been bodybuilding for a long time, who's been in business, who's done a lot, and sees how it all works together. Catch you next time. Bye.